Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet. We're here with Captain Ron. We have a great show for you guys today. We have back with us from overseas in the UK, we have Andrew Collins, who is a science and history writer and the author of many books, but we are going to be specifically talking about his latest book, the Cygnus Key. That's and right. We are going to have a great time because there's so much information that is in this book that we have not talked about before. Gobekli Tepe, the Giza pyramids, and how there's a connection between the two. So we are going to have all of you on edge with our guest right here. In Truth Be Told, we have Andrew Collins. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hello, Tony, and Captain Ron. I'm good.
Well, thank you so much. And listen, I have to say that the last time you were on, it's been a while, we talked about Göbekli Tepe specifically, and I'm glad you kind of expanded into the connections, and other areas. So I think Ron wants to take the first question this time around.
Well, yeah, let's start off with the Göbekli Tepe. Let's talk about, is that the oldest megalith that we know of as of right now?
Sort of is the answer. I mean, there's a couple of standing stones that are in the Sinai area in the Negev region of Israel, which probably predate it by a few hundred years, probably 10,000, maybe even 11,000 BC. Plus, in Europe, in the caves of France, there are a few large blocks that have been erected that have carved figures on them, and they date to about 15,000 BC. But as far as an actual enclosure that's made of stone with carved standing pillars, Göbekli Tepe is the oldest. There's no question about that at all.
Well, why don't you tell us how big is this? Like, how big are these stones? Like these megaliths?
Well, the largest of them, which is in this particular enclosure known as Enclosure D, they're 18.5 feet tall. They weigh 15 to 20 tons. And the ones I'm thinking about are the two central monoliths that stand right in the center. And around them are like these rings of stones, in every one of the enclosures. And they're like radial spokes of a wheel. When people think of something like a stone circle, you think of Stonehenge, where the wide face is facing towards the center. Right. These have the thin face pointing towards these two huge monoliths. And the stones themselves are also anthropomorphic in an abstract manner. In other words, they are meant to represent human beings of some description because they have these reliefs of like these strange arms on the side of them that come around the front of the stones as like these long spindly fingers. There's evidence of some kind of dress or lapels or like a head of a guard, things around their neck, and other features which tell us very clearly that they're meant to represent something. Now, whether they are the first gods, celestial beings, great ancestors, you can debate it, but they represent human beings of some description. I mean, anthropomorphic beings.
What's interesting, though, is that this is right out of the Stone Age. These are hunter-gatherers, and all of a sudden you have this 20-foot megalith structures with that detailed carving. This is the first example of that. So that represents a leap, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, Göbekli Tepe was discovered in 1994. Excavations began in 1995. And in an earlier book of mine called From the Ashes of Angels, which was actually being written at the very time that the first spade went into the ground at Göbekli Tepe in 1995, I speculated that the myths and legends that surrounded this area, to do with it being the Garden of Eden, paradise, heaven on earth, and that these angelic beings known as the Watchers and the Nephilim, who lived in this almost kibbutz-style settlement on a mountaintop, which is basically what the Book of Enoch suggests, which is this apocryphal work that talks about these angels and the fallen angels and how they interacted with humankind. what I suggested was that there was a memory here of flesh and blood human beings. These watchers were not incorporeal beings, messengers of God. They clearly were some people that lived in this area, this very area where Göbekli Tepe would be found around this time. And so I said that they were probably some kind of elite group of shamans that had come in from another area of the ancient world, taken over the local population and given them various new inventions, everything from agriculture to metallurgy to the earliest wine, the earliest beer, various different firsts for humanity, which is exactly what the Watchers were said to have given humankind after they'd taken mortal wives. Well, to find that Göbekli Tepe was in exactly the area that I'd predicted that evidence of this lost culture, this lost civilization would be found was quite extraordinary. And I knew at that point that, my theories were correct. And it was so strange, as I said, that I was writing that book at the very time that Göbekli Tepe was being discovered. And knowledge of it was not made known until the year 2000. So I had no knowledge of its existence until then. But of course, when I did see the first pictures of it, which was in a German magazine, it just blew my mind. I just thought, well, this is it. This is, your evidence of a smoking gun of a lost civilization, if you like. But who were these people? What was their mindset? What were they thinking? Where did they come from? And it wasn't until 2004 that I finally got the opportunity to go to Göbekli Tepe. And I remember standing there looking at the stones for the first time and thinking, who were these people? And the one thing that I noticed is that all of the main temples, the main enclosures, seemed to be faced towards the northwest. And I began to realise that they may be looking at a star. And that star turned out to be Deneb, the bright star in the constellation of Cygnus, the celestial bird or swan, which is also known as the Northern Cross because it forms like the shape of a cross in the northern sky. And what I was to find out was not only was Cygnus venerated around the world in much later cultures from the Neolithic period onwards as a place of entrance and exit to the sky world, but also just 25 miles away from Göbekli Tepe, they were venerating the same area of sky as almost a living god at a place called Haran, which is this ancient city of star worshippers called the Sabians. And they were venerating the same area of sky, and their god was actually called the North, Shamal, which just means the North. And I realised at this point that these Sabians, who lived many thousands of years after Göbekli Tepe, which, by the way, dates to between 9,500 and 8,000 BC, that they'd inherited a lot of the ideas that had been at Göbekli Tepe, and they preserved them right the way through to medieval times when it was taken over and the city was destroyed.
Well, I know a lot of our audience might ask this question, and I even thought about this, and you may have touched on it a little bit. But with being an ancient civilization, they built this amazing structures, and for a reason. But why do you feel that they're like no pottery, no homes, no villages, nothing, not even hardly a trace has been found other than Göbekli Tepe?
Well, I mean, I don't think we should see Göbekli Tepe in isolation. I mean, firstly, there are similar enclosures in the area of southeast Turkey. I mean, not as big as this, but most of these are unexcavated or they're much smaller, much simpler. But they certainly relate to the same culture. But around the world, we're beginning to find evidence of these, what we call monumental architecture, or supersizing what were known up to that time as cult buildings. And it seems to be a trend. It's there at Göbekli Tepe, it's there probably in Java at this place called Gunung Padang, which is this weird pyramid hill which I've been to. I was there a couple of years ago. That's now dated to at least 8,000 BC. Even Stonehenge in England, there was an early form of that going back to 8,000 BC at least. And we're beginning to find that at the end of the last ice age, a lot of these temples were for the... And of course, you have to ask yourself why. And I think the answer is to do with the time frame, because not only is it the end of the last ice age, but the world was just recovering from a 1,200-year ice age that had been triggered by a cosmic event, a comet impact, which had devastated the northern hemisphere around 10,800 BC, and had had repercussions and reverberations in its own right for several hundred years afterwards. And the people of the world lived in fear that these cataclysms would come again and again. And I think that Göbekli Tepe is a response to these events. And what they're doing is creating almost like a portal, a stargate, if you like, between this world and the next, which shamans, having gathered together, maybe even for the first time, into almost like the first priesthood, could use to interface through altered states of consciousness and enter into the other world and deal with the supernatural forces or creatures that they believed to be responsible for cataclysms. And this included things like big dogs, foxes, wolves, supernatural creatures that were seen to be associated with the appearance of comets. I mean, this is not in the book, by the way. I put all this in my previous book, which is Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods. I mean, what I've done in the new book, which is the Cygnus key, is to try and show that what was going on at Göbekli Tepe was part of a much earlier evidence of like a high civilization stroke, you know, advanced culture that must have existed much earlier than Göbekli Tepe itself. And I start looking towards where the culture at Göbekli Tepe came from. And it's very easy to start tracing back, almost like, you know, fingerprints, if you like, or footprints of where the people at Göbekli Tepe originally come from. And it looks like it was from the north. The stone tool technology tells us that. And not just beyond the Caucasus, which is to the north of Anatolia, but somewhere in Russia. And you start looking eastwards towards the area of the Ural Mountains. I mean, just in the past few weeks, archaeologists examining this very strange 20 feet tall wooden idol known as the Shigir idol, which was found in the Ural Mountains, have looked at this and said this is very similar to the styles at Göbekli Tepe, and that dates to the same age as Göbekli Tepe, which is about 9,600 BC, suggesting that there was some connection between Göbekli Tepe and the Ural Mountains at that time. Well, we know that there was high culture in the Urals. They had decorated caves there, like in Spain and France. There's other evidence of high culture there. And then you say to yourself, well, where does that come from? And you have to look even further east to trace the origins of that. And eventually you end up in the area of the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, where as early as 24,000 years, there were some very, very advanced settlements, particularly at a place called Malta, M-A-L-T-A, you know, just like the island, very close to the huge inland sea of Lake Baikal. And here you have an incredibly advanced culture, manufacturing these beautiful goddess statues, these beautiful swan pendants, these other weird devices, including what we call the Malta plate, which is this series of 7 spirals drawn onto this plate made of mammoth ivory. And all of the different spirals, of which there are 7, have numbers which are all meaningful to do with the lunar cycles, eclipse cycles over a very long period of time, and other star-based cycles. And it's very clear that this is like some kind of teaching device, and that the people of 24,000 years ago had an incredibly advanced knowledge of the stars, eclipses, the moon. And you have to ask yourself, where did all this come from? And what was going on in this area? And then you have to start linking it with the discovery in this area of this previously unknown hominin or proto-human population known as the Denisovans. Some people like to call them the Denisovans, but it's easier just to say Denisovans. And they existed from several 100,000 years ago down to about 40,000 years ago. And evidence of them has been found in a cave known as the Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains. And they display incredible evidence of high culture, including the most beautiful bracelet, jewellery, that's made of this green stone called chlorite, that's pierced through with a drilled hole. And the feed rate of this drill is so fast that it's comparable to a modern drill. These same people created the first bone needles to make tailored clothing. They may well have been riding around on horses. There's evidence of that. They almost certainly made the first musical instrument in the form of a whistle or flute, which was found in this Denisova cave. And their stone tool technology ends up becoming the main toolkit of the main modern human communities of the Upper Paleolithic era from around 45,000 years down to the time of Göbekli Tepe. And, you know, something big was going on in southern Siberia. And I believe that the Denisovans and their hybrid descendants, because there's no question that we also interbred with them, because their DNA or ancestry has been found now in a large number of human populations, mostly in eastern, southern and southeastern Asia. But they carry the genes of the Denisovans right the way through to this day. So, you know, we know that the Denisovans were in Siberia. We know that they interbred with us, and they seem to have an incredible high state of human behavior, much more than our own human ancestors at this time, or the Neanderthals, who were the people who occupied most of Western Eurasia. We also interbred with those, and they were incredibly advanced, but not as advanced as the Denisovans. They were out on their own. I mean, they seemed to be, in my opinion, the source of the lost civilization.
Amazing. Let me ask you this, Andrew. You were saying that you think Göbekli Tepe may be a portal, or it could have been thought of as a portal. And then it's interesting you said that it also faces Cygnus. Isn't Cygnus considered a portal in the sky as well?
Yes, it is, yeah. I mean, you know, for various reasons. I mean, firstly, it's very prominently positioned on the Milky Way. It's where the Milky Way splits in two. And there are various cultures around the world that talk about what they call the path of souls. And this is the Milky Way being used as a road or river along which the souls of the deceased travel, either in their human form or as a bird, to reach the afterlife. And it's said in many, many different accounts around the world that they reach a point where the path of souls splits into two separate streams or two separate logs, you know, two separate bridges, and that there you encounter some kind of judge that will judge the soul. In Native American tradition, it's a bird-headed individual, which fits very well with Cygnus, because there's no question that this is where Cygnus is, and academics in America that have looked in this have concluded that this does relate to Cygnus in a form of a bird, that clearly that the point of entry into the afterlife was in the area of Cygnus. But the other important thing is that going back to about 15,000 BC, for a period of a few thousand years, Cygnus also corresponded with the northern celestial pole. Now, that's the point around which the whole of the northern sky revolves. It's the center of the sky as you perceive it in the northern hemisphere. So today we've got the pole star, Polaris, marking that spot. But around 15,000 BC, it was Cygnus. It was the stars of Cygnus, Deneb, and another two at a slightly later point. And what it meant is that all the stars revolved around Cygnus. This celestial bird or cosmic bird in the sky was just turning around and around and around every night, carrying with it the Milky Way, almost like some incredible cosmic propeller going round this center of the sky. And that's something that doesn't happen today. And what would also have happened with the Milky Way at this time is that because it was revolving around like a propeller, every night at one point it would stand up vertically from the northern horizon and go directly overhead, directly over the zenith point. Now, this must have been an incredible sight to see. And it's something that we'll never see because due to the process known as precession, the precession of the equinoxes, which changes the positions of the stars in relation to the horizon, that doesn't happen anymore. The northern celestial pole is well away from the Milky Way, so that just does its own thing now. It doesn't spin like a propeller anymore. So these are all reasons why the ancients would have seen the area of Cygnus as important. But there does seem to be something more to it than that. And I have written in earlier books that there are cosmic rays coming from Cygnus that affect human evolution. There's a star there at the moment that's under focus from the astronomical world called Tabby's star, otherwise known as KIC 8462852, which astronomers have seriously theorized that there might be some kind of alien megastructure revolving around this star. Now, we're not sure about that, but what we can say is that the reason they're saying this is because the star keeps dipping its light in a very peculiar fashion, suggestive of something artificial going on. And as it dips its light, it's actually almost causing mathematical patterns in a very strange way. And I think that there is a good chance that some kind of intelligent life is connected with the star. So is it possible that the ancients knew something about this constellation that we're only now beginning to understand ourselves for the first time? I think that's possible.
You were talking about this, the two bridges. It felt like a heaven and hell kind of a judgment thing to me.
It is, in a way. Yeah.
How old does that date back?
Oh, all the way, really. I mean, in
it's incredible
North
that
America,
they would think like that.
For instance, I mean, you've got at least 30 to 40 different tribes in, various parts from the very extreme north in Canada all the way down to Florida, down into Alabama or whatever, that all have very similar beliefs in this cosmic death journey. The idea that the soul makes this transition at the point of death. And what they say is that on leaving the physical plane, the body would make a leap of faith towards a point of entry onto the Milky Way. And normally this point of entry is the Orion constellation. Sometimes it's the Pleiades,
unaffordable for most radio stations.
but it's generally in that area.
Console has changed that at a fraction of the price of other 50.
What happened there? We get some studio interference?
Got it. Go ahead. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I thought we were on a commercial break.
No,
but,
that's coming up next. Yes.
Okay. Well, give me plenty of water.
Yes, we will.
But you'd leap to Orion or Pleiades, and then you would continue the journey around to where the Milky Way forks. And this, as I said, various academic journals, books have all said that point of the split is where Cygnus is placed. And this is the last point on the Milky Way before you enter into the afterlife. Now, as I said, these are beliefs and ideas that have been around probably for, many, many, many thousands of years. Almost certainly they predate the sinking of the Beringia land bridge that connected Siberia with Alaska, which occurred around 8,500 BC. So that makes them contemporary with Göbekli Tepe, where you find similar ideas. I mean, there's a stone at Göbekli Tepe known as the Vulture Stone, or Pillar 43. And this has got almost like a map of the heavens on it. And it seems like Cygnus is represented by this vulture. You've got Scorpius there, you've got other signs. And it seems to be a star map. The same idea of entering into the sky world via these portals and going up to Cygnus, and from there entering into an afterlife. I mean, it's the same ideas, but these ideas do seem to be universal. And this is what I try to show in the Cygnus Key, that they all seem to focus on the area of Siberia, which obviously is in sort of southern, sort of southeastern Russia. And a lot of these ideas were very clearly in place in the early Upper Paleolithic era, so 20, 30,000 years ago, and arguably earlier than that.
It is absolutely amazing to me how old. That feels like such a cerebral thought of leaving your body. That feels so much more contemporary than 20,000 years ago, doesn't it, Tony? It's hard to believe. Yeah. And that it's universally across the planet. There's something in us that tells us that that's it.
Well, it's one of the oldest things. I mean, at this place called Malta, M-A-L-T-A, near Lake Baikal, they've found these swan pendants. They're made of mammoth ivory, and they're like long-necked swans. I mean, they found loads of them. And some of them were deliberately orientated north-south. And the archaeologists that have been involved in the study of these artifacts say that, firstly, they're connected with the idea that swans and geese migrated north and south every year. And this has often been associated with carrying the soul towards heaven, a northerly placed heaven. That's point one. Secondly, that these swan pendants are related to the idea that the soul becomes a bird at death or before incarnation. And thirdly, that these 24,000-year-old pendants are the first manifestation of what can be described as animism in anywhere in Siberia. And that's very, very important. In other words, the earliest forms of what we can refer to as shamanism come from this, and it relates to the soul transforming into a bird and taking flight to a heaven that's clearly in the northern sky.
Well, we are talking with Andrew Collins, and we are talking about his latest book, The Cygnus Key, and you can get that on Amazon, I'm sure, at innertraditions.com and multiple outlets for books. But we are going to take a quick break from our sponsors. When we come back, I want to find out the connection between the Giza pyramids and Göbekli Tepe, because this is
well pronounced. Good job.
You know, I'm a country boy from Kansas. You got to give me a break. All right, so we're going to be right back with Truth Be Told right here on UBN Radio. Don't go anywhere.
Join me, George Norrie, in Indian Wells, California, June 1st through the 4th for the Contact in the Desert UFO Conference, an epic weekend of exploration into ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, and UFO sightings. More than 100 lectures, panels, workshops, and events with leading experts Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Wilcock, Linda Moulton Howe, Eric Von Doniken, Corey Good, Doc Wallach, and more. Get tickets at contactinthedesert.com. It's time to make contact. contactinthedesert.com.
Hey, this is Tony from Truth Be Told. Captain Ron and I want to tell you about a new product that is sponsoring our show called GetTheTea.com, home of Life Change Tea. We've been using this product for over a month now, and we've seen a change in the way we feel. More energy, starting to lose weight. As someone that works out on a regular basis, I didn't know if this tea was really going to help me, but I have to say, I was surprised, feeling great with more energy, and I have lost a few pounds in over a few weeks. So Captain Ron and I endorse this product, and we hope that you go to getthetea.com and pick up the Super Tea. Life Change Tea is a unique blend of all natural ingredients used with great results for several years. They take great pride in selling all organic U.S. manufactured product. It's a special blend which aids in maintaining great digestion, boosting your immune system, and may help cleanse your body from unwanted intruders. So stay healthy, stay happy by going to getthetea.com. Tell them that Truth Be Told sent you. All right, we're back, and we hope you get the tea, and we're going to see you at Contact in the Desert just in 1 week. We hope you guys can come out and say hi to us and see all the amazing speakers out there. So we are back with Andrew Collins. We are talking about his latest book. It's called The Cygnus Key, and we are having a fascinating conversation, and he's giving us some amazing insights and information that many of us don't know. But one thing that I do find fascinating is Göbekli Tepe in the Giza pyramids. There's a connection, and I really want to find out through Andrew what that connection is. And so, Andrew, if you could give us an explanation of why should we believe that there's a connection when there's definitely a possible thousands of years difference.
Well, to start off with, let's go back to Göbekli Tepe. I mean, that's in southeast Turkey,
right,
as is today. Now, you can trace the stone tool technology from Göbekli Tepe all the way through the Levant, the countries today of Palestine,
right,
Israel, Lebanon, Syria. And it ends up in Egypt by about 8000 BC at a site called Helwan. Now, Helwan is just to the south of modern-day Cairo. It's on the Nile itself. You can look out from there to the Giza Plateau, so it's quite close. And we can easily form a bridge and show that the same culture that was at Göbekli Tepe was also present in northern Egypt, certainly by 8000 BC. And it was setting up a settlement there, which, by the way, was already old by that time and had been there since at least 18,000 BC. But there was obviously trafficking between southeast Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and northern Egypt. So, there's no reason why the ideas from Göbekli Tepe didn't end up in Egypt. But what happens is that these settlements by Helwan continue all the way from that point onwards down to dynastic times. I mean, the positions of them, sort of vary slightly, but they're all in the same general vicinity. And it seems as if this was a very, very important area that's remembered in ancient Egyptian myth. At a temple in southern Egypt called Edfu, which is the temple of Horus, there are what's known as the building text or the foundation text. Now, these tell about the very origins of Egypt. It says, who the first mythical beings were, how they created the first enclosure, the first temple, etc., etc. And what's so interesting about this is, firstly, it talks about this being in the form of a bird coming out of the north and landing on a perch, something like a standing stone, and his helpers, who are known as the Sheptu, who also seem to be like bird shamans or something, then help, create this first temple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the main commentary on these building texts say that the style of writing, the particular names that are used, all make it clear that this primeval temple existed somewhere in the area of Memphis. Now, that was the capital of Lower Egypt from the very first dynasty, or first or second dynasty, and various other reasons tell me very clearly that these building texts from Edfu are talking about Helwan. There's no question about that in my mind whatsoever. They're talking about the foundation point of Egypt in Helwan, the very same place that we can link with Göbekli Tepe. So we've got this direct thing. Not only that, but that a lot of the early myths to do with this bird of creation in Egypt, sometimes they refer to it as the Bennu bird that comes and sits on this pillar known as the Ben stone. This is another variation of the very same story I've been talking about. They all seem to relate to the area of Helwan. In fact, Helwan in the past was known as the place of the Bennu, the place of the Bennu bird. So Helwan was conceived of as the place of the beginning in ancient Egypt, what they called Zep Tepe, the first time. It wasn't Giza, it was Helwan. And what becomes obvious is that the influence of Helwan goes on to inspire the foundation of the Giza pyramid fields via the priesthood of a place called Heliopolis, which is just to the north of Cairo. But the Heliopolis that's there is a later day form of Helwan. Helwan is the original place of Heliopolis. So all of these ideas then end up being incorporated into the design and placement of the three main pyramids of Giza.
Wow.
And what we find here is that, firstly, the three pyramids are on an arc. If you find the center of that arc, it's about 2 kilometers, about 1.5 miles southeast of the pyramid field. Well, just a point just beyond that, if you stand there, you will see the 3 wing stars of Cygnus set down perfectly into each of the peaks of the 3 pyramids of Giza. The third pyramid, the second pyramid, then the first. 3 stars setting into 3 different pyramid peaks. Now that's interesting because obviously this would have been a visual thing that people could have seen from the ground. But if you then go overhead and look at the geographical placement of those 3 pyramids, they exactly match the same 3 stars as you see them in the sky.
Now, hold on, Andrew, right there, right 1 second. I mean, that sounds really interesting and it really ties in. But I thought that, Robert Bruval and those guys claimed that it's Orion and not Cygnus.
Cygnus is much closer, and everybody will tell you this. And also, there is a perfect context for Cygnus.
I love the context. That adds a new element to it.
Well,
but
it's more than. It's more than this because there are no texts inside the Great Pyramid or its neighbours. But shortly after this time, just about 100 years later, they started to put the so-called pyramid texts inside the pyramids, and these tell very specifically the journey of the soul as it reaches the afterlife. And it says that first the soul goes west, then it goes in through this underground realm known as the Duat, which is almost like this cave world, which is under the earth. It goes round to the east, comes out and goes up into the pre-dawn eastern sky where it meets Orion, okay? Then it continues the journey towards the north into the center of the sky, and it then joins with the stars that are referred to as the imperishable stars, the stars that never set, or those that set very briefly and rise again. You know, those that revolve around the center of the sky. That is the destination of the pharaoh. It's not Orion. That is only the first portal that the soul reaches. It then continues on. Orion is the god Sah, S-A-H. And this was seen as like almost like the brother of the pharaoh in death. Because the pharaoh, when he dies, he automatically became the god Osiris. Now, Osiris is not only the god of the dead, he is the dead god. He is the god that is dead, because in the legend connected with Osiris, he's killed treacherously by his brother Set. Okay? And therefore he became connected with those that are dead. But the pyramid texts talk about the pharaoh in his form of Osiris going back to the embrace of the womb of his mother. His mother is Nut, spelled N-U-T, the sky goddess who is personified in the sky as the Milky Way. And the womb of Nut is the constellation of Cygnus. Cygnus is the cosmic womb, and that is where the pharaoh was going back to. And this is in the pyramid text. It's you know, this is not my idea either. You know, an American astronomer by the name of Ronald Wells was the first person to link Cygnus with the womb of Nut and the Milky Way, and it's pretty unanimous that Nut herself is personified in the sky as the Milky Way. She's seen as this arch goddess, this goddess that arches over the earth.
Right.
And
well, we got something to argue with Bouval about now.
I know, right?
We can take this to him, and it seems like this is supported by a lot of stuff.
It's a little bit like a football team, isn't it? I mean, you know, either you support Manchester United or you support Liverpool.
Right.
You know,
well, I mean, this is
you're going to do that until the day you die. I mean, you know, Robert Bouval, I mean, he's a very good friend of mine. You know, we have a laugh and a joke about, you know, the fact that we have differences of opinion.
So you've already had this argument with him. What does he say about it?
No, I mean, I've been at lectures where I've stood up by his side and said to the audience that it's not Orion, but you know, we accept that, and it's healthy to have more than one view.
Sure,
of course. Yeah.
And I personally believe that there is better evidence to suggest that the three pyramids are aligned to Cygnus. And I tell you this because we're not just relying on the geographical positions of the three pyramids corresponding to the astronomical positions of the stars. With Cygnus, it works in 3 dimensions, both on the horizontal plane and the vertical plane. It's 3-dimensional. That's the alignment for Cygnus.
And being in that pyramid text, that's strong.
Right.
That is really strong.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, before we run out of time here, can you also talk about, since we're talking about Egypt, isn't there? Let's talk about those caves that you sort of are involved in.
Well, I mean, back in 2008, I mean, I'm just going to grandly say this, that myself and an Egyptological colleague of mine by the name of Nigel Skinner Simpson discovered a whole cave complex beneath the pyramid, you know, the pyramids of Giza. Nobody knew anything about this, or if they did, they certainly never mentioned it. And it was in a tomb, which nobody knew anything about. There was just one vague reference from about 1840. And my colleague found these obscure diary accounts from about 1819, 1820 that talked about caves. Now, he was an expert, and is an expert, on the literature that's been published on the Giza monuments. And he said these caves are definitely not mentioned in any of that literature. In other words, these caves are lost. And after a 5-year search, the entrance to it was in the northwest corner of the plateau, about 850 meters to the west of the Great Pyramid. And these caves lead towards not the Great Pyramid or the Sphinx, but towards the second pyramid. And we explored them for a distance of about 120 meters, which doesn't sound a lot, but the whole place was full of huge, great boulders of rocks that fell down from the sky. It was full of bats, full of poisonous spiders and creepy crawlers you don't even want to think about.
Right.
And, and we penetrate that far. We thought, safety-wise, we've gone far enough. We've proved our case. We need to get out, write about it, tell the authorities, which is what we did. The only trouble is it almost caused an international incident, as you can imagine, because, stupid amateurs like us can't,
discover anything, right?
Caves like this that nobody knows about. So first there was denial by Dr. Zoe Hawass. We actually went to see him. But then 6 months later, there's this TV reality show called Chasing Mummies, which is following around Zoe Hawass. And he's going inside these caves, which he clearly didn't even know existed. He didn't obviously believe us. And there he is inside them, saying it's the greatest adventure he's been on at Giza. You can't make this stuff up.
That's amazing.
Was there anything found other than just the cave itself? Was there any artifacts that were ever found?
No. I mean, there was only one thing that I saw inside it was a very small piece of a mummy.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was very small. I mean, it could easily have wrapped a small animal or something like that in it. But there was nothing else. The only thing that we saw inside was this very strange chamfering of the walls here and there, like these parallel lines, which were in places that they shouldn't be. They were like underneath rocks and, in areas where you don't need to knock off a bit of rock and chamfer it down. So they seem to be more functional in the sense of having a symbolic value as opposed to purely practical. So couldn't really get to the bottom of that. But no, you see, I am certain. I mean, I did a book called Beneath the Pyramids, which was all about the discovery of these caves. That came out in 2009. I'm actually going to rewrite that book next, actually. I mean, there's not the next book, by the way. I've got something else coming up on Denisovans, which we're talking about. But because I now understand why those caves were so important and why the ancient Egyptians during the Pyramid Age decided that they would construct this weird tomb there and create this huge rectilinear chamber inside the caves, because it has a specific relationship to another chamber inside the Great Pyramid known as the subterranean chamber. But that's something for the future, but just to whet your appetites.
No.
Because that's, and I only know this because I went inside this thing called the subterranean chamber, deep beneath the Great Pyramid for the first time in March this year. And oh my God, why have I never been in there before? Because it has so many similarities to what's going on in the caves that there has to be a relationship. And I think I've sussed out what that is, but that's, as I said, for a future book. At the moment, we're talking about the Cygnus key, and that's out now. It's published by Inner Traditions, or Bear & Company, as the imprint name is. And, it's at the moment, it's my magnum opus, if I'm correct. It's everything I've been trying to say for the last 20 years is in this book.
That's great.
Recommend it to your listeners.
Well, we
Definitely.
appreciate you putting this together, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and we really appreciate you. Please go out and get the Cygnus Key and go to innertraditions.com. This is Andrew Collins. Go to his website, andrewcollins.com. And Andrew, are you having any speaking engagements coming up soon, or are you going to be over here in the States anytime soon?
Yes. Well, I've got a few in this country, which I won't worry you too much about, but the next time I'm in the States is for Atlantis, that's what it's called, ARKLANTS, I think, which is the James Tiburon Earthkeepers Trust event at Little Rock, Arkansas in September. Be a big event. There's 2,000 to 3,000 people generally go to these events. It's massive. And it's a really, really good weekend if people want to go. So that's in Little Rock, Arkansas. The exact dates, you've got me on that at the moment. I think it's about the 21st of September, around the autumn equinox period.
Oh, perfect.
Andrew, you can give your UK thing. This is, truth be told, worldwide. We have a UK audience,
we have
too.
A huge
so.
UK audience. So.
Well, I'm at a big UFO conference, UFO magazine, UFO Truth magazine. That's, I think, the 8th and 9th of September. Then the following weekend, actually it's about the 15th, 16th, I'm at Atlantis. That's the weekend. And then I get confused, but I mean, just come on to andrewcollins.com. It's all listed
there. You
there.
go.
There's a nice preview of all where I'm going to be. I get confused myself sometimes, to be honest.
You just show up.
Which reminds me, I need to remind Tony that next week we're going to be at Contact in the Desert out in Indian Wells.
Oh, I
yes,
know.
we saw you. It was awesome.
Yeah. I don't know why they haven't invited me back, but I'll find out one day.
I do know why they did not invite Tony back, but I think you're going to come with me this year,
I'm
right?
going to sneak in.
We're going to sneak in.
It was that drunken, Anyway, so we're going to get out of here, but thank you so much, and please come back again. I'm sure we have lots more to talk about in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you both for having me.
You got it. All right, everybody. That was another amazing show that we have the top guests that you guys suggest to have on, and we appreciate you for tuning in every week. And please go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, leave comments, and please share it with all your friends, and we appreciate it. So
we'll
until next time, Contact next week. We'll see you there. Bye.